LG's C series and Samsung's S90 series have gone head-to-head for years. Now that Samsung has ditched the QD OLED panel in favor of a WOLED panel on this model, the two TVs have even more in common. Today, we're comparing the LG C6 to the Samsung S90H. The C6 offers a bit more overall, but the S90H does have a trick up its sleeve: bright room performance. Do you want to see more TVs battle it out? If so, be sure to subscribe. The LG C6 is available in sizes ranging from 42 to 65 inches. If you buy the 77 or 83-inch models, you get the C6H, which has an RGB tandem panel that delivers higher peak brightness and better color vibrancy. The 48-inch model also uses an RGB tandem panel, while the 42-inch model is a lot dimmer than the larger sizes. The Samsung S90H is available in sizes ranging from 42 inches to 83 inches. However, the 48 and 77-inch sizes use an RGB tandem panel as well, while the 42-inch uses a much dimmer panel. For this video, we'll be comparing the 55 and 65-inch C6 to the 55, 65, and 83-inch S90H, since those are the sizes from each brand that use a comparable WOLED panel. Although there are some key differences between the two TVs, they still have a lot in common. Both TVs have perfect black levels, so they display inky blacks in a dark room with no haloing around highlights or subtitles. Color volume is very similar too, so these models display equally vibrant colors. They also each have very wide viewing angles, so both TVs maintain their image quality when you're watching from the sides of the screen. You'll also find pretty much identical gaming features, since both offer 4 HDMI 2.1 ports and up to 4K at 165 Hz, as well as VRR. Gaming performance is also pretty much a draw here, since they both have lightning-fast response times for unrivaled motion clarity, and low input lag for a snappy feel. So, what's the difference? Let's start with HDR Brightness in filmmaker mode, since this is one of the biggest differences between the two TVs. Simply put, the LG C6 is the winner here, since it's almost 400 nits brighter with a 2% and 10% window. Brightness is fairly equal between the two TVs with 25% window sizes and above, but smaller highlights pop out more on the C6. It's not just test slides that show this, since the C6 also performs better with our real scene tests. As you can see, the C6 is over 350 nits brighter with our hallway lights scene, leading to a punchier image. With our yellow skyscraper scene, the brightest part of the image is almost 100 nits brighter, so the light at the top of the building stands out more against the night sky. The most noticeable difference shows up in our landscape test. The illuminated pool should peak at around 300 nits, and the C6 handles this almost perfectly since it reaches 330 nits. On the other hand, the S90H really struggles with this test, peaking at just under 140 nits. The pool just looks dim and doesn't really stand out from the rest of the image like it does on the C6. Both TVs offer dynamic tone mapping if you care less about accuracy and prefer a brighter image overall. These features tend to raise the brightness of the whole image, so shadows and midtones are lifted, which is useful if you're not in a dark room. However, the peak brightness of highlights doesn't increase that much on the S90H, whereas the feature adds over 200 nits of peak brightness to highlights on the C6 in all 3 of our real scene tests. The C6 uses LG's Alpha 11 Gen 3 processor, while the S90H uses Samsung's NQ4 AI Gen 3 processor. So, which one of these Gen 3 processors does a better job? Both TVs score similarly when it comes to PQ EOTF tracking. Neither one is perfect, but both respect the filmmaker's intent when it comes to displaying HDR content, with minor deviations in tracking that are hard to notice in real scenes. They both also do a similar job at upscaling. You'd be hard-pressed to notice much of a difference when the TVs are upscaling 1080p, and they're surprisingly close even with 480p content, although the details are a bit more defined on the C6. There's more of a difference in their ability to smooth out the macro blocking and other artifacts in low-quality content. They perform the same when it comes to preserving details in the image, but the C6 does a much better job of cleaning up those pesky compression artifacts. In our test image, you can still see macro blocking in the dark area on the S90H, while that same area looks really clean on the C6. When it comes to gradient handling, the C6 is also the winner. It's not like the S90H has super noticeable banding and gradients, and it still performs excellently here, with only some subtle banding in grays, blues, and dark greens. However, the C6 has some of the best gradient handling we've ever seen due to its 13-bit processing pipeline, with only some barely noticeable banding in darker greens. There's more that goes into processing than what we've mentioned here, and our processing usage is currently under development. If there's a specific area of processing you'd like to see us test, please go ahead and let us know in the comments. Dolby Vision versus HDR10 Plus has been a hot topic for years now, and it's kind of the modern-day equivalent of VHS versus Betamax or Blu-ray versus HD DVD. The S90H supports HDR10 Plus, while the C6 supports Dolby Vision. Neither TV supports the upcoming HDR10 Plus Advanced or Dolby Vision 2. If you mainly stream your content, you shouldn't worry too much about which format is better. Both formats are widely available on all the major streaming services, and both use dynamic metadata to help tone map HDR content to the capabilities of your display. There really isn't much of a difference, unless you collect physical media. HDR10 Plus is only found on a handful of 4K Blu-rays, while Dolby Vision has become more commonplace on discs, with hundreds of titles supporting the format. On top of that, the version of Dolby Vision found on many discs gives creators more tools to enhance their image quality. If you're shelling out cash on expensive 4K Blu-rays, the Dolby Vision support on the C6 is nice to have, since you know you're getting the most out of your discs. The C6 has been the clear winner so far, but bright room performance is where the S90H truly shines, mainly due to its matte screen coating. These two TVs offer pretty much identical HDR brightness. The C6 is easily bright enough for moderately lit spaces, but the S90H is the better choice for bright rooms because of its screen coating. When you compare our direct reflection images, which are taken with a ring light facing the screen, you can easily see its reflection on the C6's glossy surface. On the other hand, that ring light reflection is almost invisible on the S90H. You could have a window or multiple lamps opposite the S90H's screen, and you still won't have to deal with distracting reflections. The C6 is more mirror-like, so reflections are an issue in brighter rooms. Samsung TVs with matte coatings have been criticized in the past for excessive black level rays, since blacks lacked depth in brighter rooms and looked a little more like charcoal. However, the big reason for those grayish blacks was because Samsung tended to pair their matte finishes with QD OLED panels, which lack a polarizer. The matte coating on the S90H does lead to more elevated blacks than the C6, but it's not a massive difference. Blacks still look nice and deep on the S90H in a bright room, so the image doesn't look washed out. If you mainly use your TV in a dark or moderately lit room, the C6 is the easy choice, since it provides punchier highlights in HDR and has better processing. However, the C6 doesn't match the bright room performance you get from the Samsung S90H, which is currently the only WOLED TV that uses a matte coating. Which TV would you choose? Let us know in the comments.